The history of this part of Portsmouth is really varied. Portsmouth is a really history-rich city, and this corner is often forgotten. But in actual fact, it's been a site of all sorts of interesting things. There was a canal built here. It was finished in 1822, which was a Portsmouth to Arundel canal, and it was designed to transport goods from Portsmouth, connecting up to London, avoiding the treacherous English Channel. But it's almost a ghost canal now, because it was obsolete almost as soon as it was built, because of the advent of railway, and there were all sorts of problems with polluting drinking water and things like that. So it's now just road names and the route of the railway, and the only bit left is the lock, which is just round the corner, hence the name Milton Locks. And then more recently it has been home to houseboats. So after the Blitz, particularly when lots of the houses in Portsmouth were bombed, people moved out into houseboats as a means of living their lives, really. And it was a bit of a fringe community with a really strong cultural identity, which is still talked about a lot today. The nature reserve is on part of the old Lock site. It's been a nature reserve since the early 90s, when the Wildlife Trust took it over from at the time it was Hampshire County Council. It was a bit of not a problem, it was just a bit of a challenge, because it's a tiny nature reserve right in the middle of the city, and that in the past has brought problems. When I started doing bits and pieces here about 8 or 9 years ago, it was basically home to fly tipping, antisocial behaviour, really sad stuff really, and just gradually we've introduced people to it and tried to get the community to fall back in love with it, and just gradually those problems have got less and less, and people have been using it for positive things and reconnecting with wildlife. We've got lots of habitats in a really small space. There's only 2 acres of it. There's a seashore habitat, grassland and woodland. In the winter, lots of migrating winter birds like brent geese, oyster catchers, curlews, all of those things use the mud. In the summer, we have lots of butterflies and grasshoppers and interesting spiders and things that live in the grass. We also have lots of garden birds that use the site, particularly things that are like sparrows and starlings, which lots of people think aren't anything particularly special, but actually they're some of our fastest declining birds in the south of England. So the fact that we've got habitat here to support them is really good. It's vitally important for cities to have green spaces, because it's really important for people's well-being, and there's more and more evidence to suggest that people's health is really positively affected by green space and the outdoors, and especially our children. We're surrounded by children who live in an island city who never go to the seaside, and so spaces like this are really important for reconnecting those people to their outdoor spaces and to wildlife and nature. And we use it basically to get people out and to get people connected with the wildlife and also with the history of their surroundings. So anything that can get people excited and interested and engaged and proud of their area is good for us. So whether that's wildlife or archaeology like today, it's just a way of introducing people to what's on their doorstep, and to getting to people to be enthusiastic and about wildlife and to stand up for it.
Intertidal zones are brilliant for archaeological finds, just being there on the surface, because every time the tide goes out there could be different things left there. Just removed one layer of silt and suddenly there's a whole new, particularly on the edge of somewhere like Langstone Harbour, which has got such an incredible archaeological heritage. So many things have been found on the foreshore generally. There stuff, and it's been great down here today with the kids, but it's amazing to see just how engaged they are with these finds. So much enthusiasm coming from them. It's a really, really great day. Lots of really interesting finds, the sort of things I was expecting to find, but a lot of it. Evidence from the periods of the houseboats in particular, I think we can definitely say we found lots to do with that, which was really great, yeah.
The Milton Locks community grew up around the southern shoreline of Langstone Harbour, in particular around the entrance to the old canal, but also by the Thatched House pub located right on the shore. The shoreline east and west of the pub were lined with houseboats. And on the land were also chalets and small bungalows, carefully built by hand. Nobody is exactly sure when the community first began, but maps show that the first homes appeared in the late 1800s, after the canal was closed. The Portsmouth and Arundel Canal land was auctioned off in 1891, and the canal filled in by the end of that century. The last sea lock is all that remains of the canal, and over the years the original lock gates have rotted away. This quiet connection to the city became a community all of its own, named after the original two sea locks where Milton met Langstone Harbour. These very early photos show the Milton Locks community coming together and enjoying a day out with fun activities on the low tide beach. At the core of this community are two pubs, the Thatched House and also the Old Oyster House. This early community had strong links to the sea, with people working in boat building, boat repair, and many other activities relating to sailing and fishing. This later map really illustrates that these properties were more than just temporary, and were actually long-term homes for many families. Milton Locks was even home to the Locks Sailing Club, an important part of the local community.
Around this area, there was many houseboats. Theirs was along that, just along there, where that piece of wreck is, and then all the way round here. And of course, in through the middle where the car park is, there was a huge community there of people in their chalet type things, that they were all built from anything they could get hold of virtually. They were all shapes and sizes. Some were sort of built on things, from whatever they had, bases, but a lot of them seemed to be just old fishing boats really and stuff like that. My uncle was actually here in the early 40s. I mean, my uncle's second boat, he had an old landing craft, which is very basically rectangular shape, sloped at each end, and he built a brand new one on that, which was amazing. It wasn't sort of temporary. They were here permanently for as long as they wanted to be here, and some obviously spent quite a few years of their life here. A lot of them actually apparently were fishermen as well. My uncle used to go out with a boat when he had the Noah's Ark, go out to off at Langstone fishing for cod. There could have been up to about perhaps 100 people here. There might have been a bit less. Some perhaps lived on their own, some had families, especially the ones in the chalet bits and that, because there was obviously children around there. Funny, I never really got to meet any of them. I used to end up playing in the canal bit looking for crabs. It was a very exciting place for me to come, because my aunt and uncle on their houseboat, so exciting. I forget how many times I'd come. I would come for a weekend. I'd come Friday night and she'd take me home Sunday. So it seemed forever when I stayed. She used to bring me down on the back of her bike from Fawcett Road, and after there was where the boardwalk is now, she'd park the bike and get over, park the bike between the little chalets and step over the wall, which is still there now, to get onto the beach to reach her houseboat. And as I said, sometimes there may not be any water like today, or there could be perhaps ankle deep. Sometimes it could be nearly waist high. And to think she did that winter and summer. My uncle was very fortunate because he got his electricity from Frank Cassie, who was the chandler. And he also had water on board from Frank Cassie. I don't know how that worked at all, because all the others used to have to go up towards the allotments to the tap. There was never official address, but everybody got their mail, because the postman was a regular postman and he knew everybody. So that's quite incredible, isn't it? When my auntie left, I think it was about 1961, I think it was then that people started to drift away. The boats became further apart, and I never came there much after that, because my auntie and uncle, I don't think, well, he may have done, but I know my aunt never came back, because she said once it starts, the memories, the fond memories of what she had of it were lost, and she didn't want to see it, the changes, because she left it in its sort of its peak, I suppose. It's quite. It must have been extremely sad for some people having to sort of give up, And only more recent years that people that lived in Portsmouth didn't even know this existed down there. And obviously they had people around the city that they knew, but they lived their lives as they would if they lived in a street. That my uncle's first boat, that was Charles Bettany, that was an old fishing boat, and it was called Noah's Ark because it actually looked like a miniature Noah's Ark. And that was never, although my grandfather was a photographer, it was never documented by him. The only way it's been documented is by a painting made by Edward King, who my uncle knew. And there's a painting my uncle did, and he's painted a view down through there somewhere, the little chalet bits, with Edward King sat painting at his easel. Had it been made known, people perhaps would have visited it more, and it had been perhaps documented a lot more, and there'd been a lot more interest from the side of this little world of this Milton Locks community.
Edward King is a remarkable painter who is not as well known as I think he should be. He worked in London for a time and was quite well known. His work appeared in well-known illustrated magazines, but then he experienced a period of mental ill health after his wife died, and he came to St James's Hospital in Portsmouth, where he spent the last 26 years of his life as a long-term patient. He's important to the city because he left us an astonishing visual record of Portsmouth at a time when there weren't many photographs taken. So he painted the city during the Blitz, when obviously a lot of buildings were destroyed, and he painted the wreckage following the bombing raids. He painted the grounds of St James's Hospital, the people who worked there, the trees, the heavy horses, the crops and the outbuildings. And he painted Milton Locks and the community who lived there in their houseboats and enjoyed the sense of space and tranquility that I think was one of the things that drew Edward King to that location. Milton Locks is on the eastern edge of Portsmouth, and it looks out onto Langstone Harbour, and it was a short distance away from St James's Hospital, which had 75 acres of farmland, but it didn't have that sense of open space that Milton Locks does. So Edward King was given permission to leave the hospital grounds, make the short walk to that eastern coastline of the city, and settle himself down amongst the community that grew up there of people who'd made their own houses, in effect, some after they'd become homeless in the Blitz, others for different reasons of their own. And the area is very different now. It's very built up. A lot of land was reclaimed. Land that was marshes and lakes has now been reclaimed. It's roads, it's housing estates, but you still have that lovely boundary of where the water meets the land, and that's really the boundary that's marked by Milton Locks and now the nature reserve. I think the reason he was drawn to Milton Locks was the sense of peace and quiet and space. It's very noticeable in his paintings that there's a lot of sky and that sense of being in the open. And I think it was very important for his own sense of well-being that he had all that space and peace and quiet. But the upshot for the city is that he's left us this incredible record of the geography of the area, the houseboats, little shadowy shadowy glimpses of some of the people who lived there. There's a particularly popular painting of a young girl in a red dress. I think as an artist, the red gives you a real focal point in the painting. There are very few photographs of Milton Locks in the 40s, earlier, and even through into the 60s and 70s. There are very few photos, so Edward King's paintings become even more important as a record of the area. The exhibition of his work has been hugely popular, I think for many reasons. I think because the paintings are really lovely. It's Milton Locks, but it's not Milton Locks as we know it now. It's a community that's perhaps slightly beyond the bounds of ordered society, a community that's a bit alternative, and I think particularly nowadays people can really relate to that sense of wanting to be outside. I think his images appeal to that desire to escape that perhaps we all have at one time or other in our lives. And as I say, people have been coming back to the exhibition again and again because I think it really connects with them.
Houseboat I've had for about 3.5 years, about 3 years. I got it as a sort of space so that I could paint in it. When I got it, it was used as a sort of storage area, and I saw the potential for it to be a really nice space to paint in. But of course, since then I've learned that there's a lot of history to it. I've got the paperwork for it, and could have been used as a boat in Dunkirk for bringing the soldiers back. It's very early. The hull is oak, and it's 1890, something like that, and it's been mucked around with and built on the top, but the actual boat itself is turn of the century. It was put here in 1946, towed from Chichester, and it's got it's sort of connected to the history with the houseboats just across the way there. This is a little spit of land that's sort of in Eastney. That's where you catch the ferry across to Hayling Island. What I like about it, I suppose, is that it's the last little bit of old Portsmouth. It's just a little sort of community where people come down here. Fishermen come early in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, they go off, and you see them coming back at 5 or 6 in the evening with their catch. People are friendly. Everyone's got something to do, whether they're fixing their boats, maintaining their boats, or making nets. There's a guy that makes nets. People hang out and just enjoy a very old-fashioned, quiet way of life. And I don't think there's much of that left in Portsmouth. Fantastic space to be in. Totally inspiring, you know, on all sorts of levels. The wildlife, the light, the sea. It's tremendous, you know. You can have the doors open, you can have the French doors open at the back and the door open in the front, the breeze will come through. You've got windows all the way around, so you've got this tremendous view. You actually feel like you're in the water. And I like that. I haven't tried to sort of tart it up. I've kept it very shack-like, you know, that's what I like. But cosy. So it is it's a studio, but it's also somewhere you can be and be comfortable. It's got a nice wood stove, an old wood stove, but it works really well. So that it's really warm in the winter. You can be here. Even if there's a storm, it's great. You know, you can go for a walk, and there's always a rusty old chain or a piece of driftwood or a nice shell or a stone, or even one of my favourites is to find wings off birds or bones off birds that have obviously rotted away, but they've dried out, and I like to collect those. I think people are different living by the sea in the sense that you're removed from city life. You're in nature. You're surrounded by it, and the tides coming in and out, the environment around you. I think you become part of that environment, and it's totally removed from city life. So yeah, in that sense, I think the landscape makes you different. From being here, I always get the impression that people, what they love about it is that perhaps it's a way of getting in touch with living a simpler life, a space to get away from the modern world, be in touch with nature, more. I think people are crying out for that.